Ghost Recon Wildlands is easily one of my favorite games this generation. On the surface level, I could see someone just overlooking it as another Ubisoft open world game, but that would be doing a great disservice to the game and to the potential player. Wildlands has one of the best open worlds from Ubisoft as it actually feels open, providing true freedom to the player. In some of Ubisoft's prior games, you would need to play parts of the story before you could even explore every part of the map. Wildlands drops you off and lets you go anywhere right from the start. You can do main mission stories, or you can go to different areas. You can attack bases, collect upgrades, attack convoys, and much more. Bases provide a lot of variability in how you tackle them. You can engage in intense firefights, use stealth to take everyone out one by one, use cooperative tactics with your friends, or you can have one person attack the base from the air and the other person from the ground. Or you can take a helicopter to the highest point in the game and then dive bomb to your objective. The open world has variation in all its locations. The game was impressive and a lot of fun. The open world was so rewarding that I still haven't completed the main campaign. The updates were pretty good, with a nice but small appearance from Sam Fisher, along with new modes and rewards. With this, I was definitely excited for a potential sequel when Ubisoft announced Ghost Recon Breakpoint as their direct sequel to Wildlands. I was curious how they would improve and expand on what they established in Wildlands. They released a beta for Breakpoint, and while I did enjoy it, the game felt very rough in its execution, and I wasn't too crazy about the inclusion of a looter shooter like system being used here. I enjoy looter shooters like The Division, but I felt like it was something that didn't fit the Wildlands formula and was better fit in potentially a new series and not in the Ghost Recon series. With my concerns, I felt like it was best to wait and see how Ubisoft updated and improved their game. At launch, Breakpoint was met with a lot of criticism and many issues. By March 2020, they worked on improving the game and providing more options to the player with an entirely new mode for the game that made it feel more like Wildlands with no loot grade system. Plus in March, they added a Splinter Cell DLC mission set, and I had to try it at this point. As I played Breakpoint, it was obvious that while it was an overall downgrade from Wildlands, it still had some good qualities. Breakpoint is messy, flawed, and a lot of fun. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you my review for Ghost Recon Breakpoint. I plan on discussing the many issues that I experienced playing Breakpoint, but I want to focus on what I liked about it first. Let's start out with the extreme amount of options that are provided to the player at the start of the game. For starters, you can decide if you want the game to operate more like a looter shooter or more in line with Ghost Recon Wildlands. Personally, I didn't feel like the looter shooter stuff fit this game, so I opted to take the more traditional route that made the experience feel more in line with Wildlands. You can choose the level of difficulty for the enemies that you face, and then you can play around with the different tactical options. After playing the game with the survival settings on, I found many of these settings to feel tacked on rather than fully integrated into the game, so I set many of these settings to off. Also, you can customize your interface. There's an extreme amount of options here available to the player. I think this is Ubisoft's way of trying to have their game cater to any type of player. The best part about this is how you can play the game with a friend who has completely different settings than you have. I really commend them for adding these settings. Just be prepared to be in the menus a lot before you actually start the game, so fully explore the menus and decide what you want to have on and turn off. When it comes to the gameplay, just like in Wildlands, the game is at its best when you are exploring the open world, finding bases, earning new guns, and attachments. The shooting and gameplay is generally the same as Wildlands, with some appreciated improvements. I really like how you can dodge roll now. I found this to be an auto mission in the previous game. When grenades were thrown at me in Wildlands, I had to run away when a roll would have really fit the situation. While in open combat in Breakpoint, you will have many grenades thrown at you, along with mortar fire, so the dodge roll comes in handy. I liked how the game gives you that open world freedom after a few story missions. You are free to explore the island, complete side activities, or do the story missions if you like. Like I said before, the best gameplay moments are found in the open world when you are just freely able to decide how you want to tackle bases. Bases are worth completing as you gain a lot of valuable resources along with finding additional guns and attachments. Each base is pretty unique in structure and your opposition. You can have bases that range from large areas to smaller ones, or multi-layered bases with even an underground area. Bases can have regular grunts, snipers, mortars, and a variety of drones to face. Snipers are extremely deadly as they can take you out very quickly with just a few shots. Now you can run into bases and try to tackle the situation on the fly, or you can take the time to survey the area and decide the best way to complete the base. Breakpoint succeeds in both of these areas as it's accessible for anyone to enjoy the situations, but it also allows you to take smarter routes to complete your objectives. The best situations are when you arrive to a base location, scan the enemies and survey the terrain, and then work out the best way to figure out how to take over the base with a stealth option. You have a variety of tools to help you out. Long-range weapons can help you pick off targets, lights, power generators, and drones from a safe distance. Your drone helps you to scan the area, and you have these scan-like grenades that target enemies within their radius. And if you're using the Splinter Cell class, you can pull out your sonar-like vision and be able to see through walls. This is extremely fun to do in solo play, and it's even more fun to do in co-op as you can have your friends filling for different roles to succeed in the bases. In many cases, I would take on the enemies while in closer combat, while one of my friends would be up on a hill taking them out with his sniper rifle. We would work together to maintain our stealth and take out as many enemies as possible before they became alerted. It is extremely satisfying completing an entire base without being detected, but once you are detected, you need to change your tactics on the fly to find the best means to survive a firefight. I found these bases to be the most satisfying aspect of the game. They didn't put restrictions on you on how you can approach them. One memorable one was where I had one of my friends who was sniping from a vantage point, and me and another friend worked our way to the back and infiltrated the base that way. Or you can have one friend attack the base head on while in a helicopter, and the rest of the team can sneak in on the ground and clean up the rest of the enemies. The game didn't really tell us what to do. We came up with all of this on our own, and it was satisfying to try different tactics at other bases. The different character classes help to give you an advantage depending on the role that you want to fill as you're playing. You can decide on more direct approaches, stealth avenues, or support roles depending on which class you pick. I do like that you can switch between these during the campaign if you want to change up your playstyle. Each of the classes provides a bonus to different character traits like health or stealth. While I have mixed feelings on the addition of the drones, I do like it when you have to go after the larger behemoths. These are fun boss-like encounters that provide a really good challenge. It has a few weak points along with being able to shoot off some of its armor. The behemoths keep you on your toes as they have a variety of weapons like mortars, gas, and machine guns. While I did not enjoy the main campaign story missions, the Splinter Cell DLC missions are really good with a pretty good story. The main highlight of this mission set is hearing Michael Ironside as Sam Fisher. This character has been out of the spotlight for far too long and deserves to come back with a remastered collection set and a new game. He elevates every cutscene he is in. The finale to these missions is pretty great as well, with a fun infiltration section that is bookended with some explosive action. I think this DLC has better missions than the campaign, plus you earn a pretty cool Splinter Cell outfit that you can use for the whole game. And lastly, I really enjoyed the soundtrack that was present for all the action. These are memorable tracks, and I found the soundtrack overall better than in Wildlands. Essentially, Breakpoint is at its best when it's focusing on giving the same quality gameplay from Wildlands. The main issue with Breakpoint is that while it is very fun, there are many aspects about the presentation and execution that make it feel buggy, messy, and very flawed.
Light those suckers up!
Let's start out with the added survival mechanics. Conceptually, I like the idea of being a lone soldier surrounded by enemies and needing to worry about my injuries and my stamina. If this is executed right, it will make the player feel like they are trying to fight for their life. But with Breakpoint, there are other elements that are actively going against these survival add-ons. The game wants you to feel like you are up against a wall, but then they give you a base with some allies right away. This diffuses the feeling of being on your own and trying to survive, and makes the survival elements feel more tacked on rather than something that's fully integrated into the experience. I like the idea of having a base, but I do think part of the game should have been about slowly gathering allies and making your own base. Don't just give everything to the player, let us earn it gradually. Let us start at the bottom and work our way up. Good survival-focused games are fun because they let you start out with nothing and then you slowly improve throughout the game. You lose a good amount of that feeling of improving from a survival aspect of the game if the game just hands you everything. And this is why I chose to disable these settings when playing the game, as I felt like that interfered with the gameplay and didn't really add anything meaningful to it. But part of the beauty of Breakpoint is that if you actually like these things, you can decide to keep them on for your playthrough. There are odd choices by the developers that I wasn't a fan of. Why can I only change my equipment while at a campsite? Wildlands let me do this at any point in the game. This was a great feature because then I could change my equipment on the fly and try out different weapons to see which ones I wanted to use. The campsite just slows stuff down and it hurts the pacing of the gameplay. Like I said before, I am a bit mixed on the inclusion of the drone enemies. The most annoying of these enemies are the bee-like drones that move really fast and require a lot of precision to take them out. My main issue is that the game doesn't really seem built to deal with something that's so reactive and quick to fight. The customization seems to be toned down from Wildlands. There's a generous amount of guns in Breakpoint, but the attachments seem to be limited, where this was more expansive in Wildlands. There's a large focus on the main story, but the execution of the narrative makes the cutscenes feel rather lifeless. The only character I liked was played by Jon Bernthal, and while some of the parts are really entertaining, I found the narrative to be mostly uninteresting. I feel like if the narrative focused more on the relationship with Walker, there could have been something better here. Also, the game lets you play some of the story missions out of order, which resulted in me playing one of the last missions first and totally killed the continuity for the rest of my game. So essentially, I would have one of the main villains dead really early on, yet they were appearing in these new cutscenes as I kept doing more missions. I ran into many issues that make Breakpoint feel like it was really unpolished. During many of the cutscenes, the audio was out of sync, so it looked like I was watching a bad dub, or I was watching the movie Kung Pao. I had instances where enemies would not die, and one instance where a guy I was trying to protect got stuck in the stairs. There was another situation where the camera got all messed up. If you traveled too fast in a helicopter, the game would sometimes stop so that it could kind of try and keep up and load more of the assets in. Or in other situations, you would have really bad pop-in that would cause you to go into an area, and then a few seconds later, the enemies would actually surround you and spawn in. Lastly, I do not think Ubisoft should have tried to insert looter-shooter mechanics into this game. I do like the idea of having a game that combines elements of Wildlands and The Division, but I think that would have been better reserved for a new series rather than a follow-up to Wildlands. The looter-shooter stuff doesn't really fit into the Wildlands mold, which is why I switched that option off, but like I said before, if you like it, you can keep it on, and that's actually one of the best areas about Breakpoint. Breakpoint has many areas that need more refinement and a lack of polish, but there's a good amount of fun to be had here with this title. Overall, Breakpoint is a downgrade when compared to Wildlands. In many aspects, Breakpoint feels like the game that should have come before Wildlands, but actually it's the sequel and it really doesn't feel like it. I really want to give the developers credit in providing more options to the players with the March update to allow people to play the game how they want to play it. But a lot of their post-release time is being spent on fixing their main game. But if they actually worked this stuff out in development, they could have focused on more refinements and additions rather than trying to play catch-up right now. Then there's odd elements that seem like auto missions, like no AI squad for solo play. I understand that they're adding it in later at some point, but this is something that they should have had at launch, considering it was in Wildlands from day one. Also, why is Breakpoint an always online game, when most of the game can be played in solo play? Choices like this leave me scratching my head, and the unpolished nature of the game makes makes me think the entire experience is very rough. Breakpoint is a bit of an odd recommendation. If you haven't played Wildlands, then I would recommend you try out Breakpoint, especially because it's always on sale, and then go into Wildlands, as Wildlands oddly feels like a superior sequel to Breakpoint. If you have already played Wildlands to death and you're looking for a similar type experience, then I would suggest you get this one on sale because it's a very fun game, but know that it's an overall downgrade. I look forward to Ubisoft working on this title and hopefully making it even better, and I hope that the next entry is better right out of the gate. Thank you very much for watching.